Welcome in, everyone, to our special coverage on this debate night between President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris tonight. I've got my co-pilot here, my producer David in the studio. Philip is running the show from behind the scenes here. Grover, my dog, is here. Come on up here as well. Grover is joining us tonight as well in the studio for this sort of informal hangout where we're going to be watching the presidential debate tonight. So we have about 30 minutes or so, about 28 minutes until this debate kicks off in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Something tells me there's not going to be a lot of brotherly love. There's not going to be a lot of love in that room tonight. It'll be quite a lot of love lost, I think. But, you know, I was going back over a lot of the debates over the past few years, President Trump versus Hillary Clinton, President Trump versus Ted Cruz, going toe-to-toe with some of these individuals. And a lot of people are saying, you know, he's got to be he's got to come off as not very He can't come off as attacking of Kamala Harris, right?
Well, and that's why it's good that she didn't get the rules that she wanted, because she wanted to be a hot mic the whole time, but they didn't give her that rule, so she won't be able to use the "I'm speaking," which was her whole plan.
Right. Yeah, but President Biden, they had a hot mic the whole time during the last debate.
Nope, they muted. That was the one thing that
oh, that's right, they muted. Yeah, but he was President Trump was just standing there the whole time
because it was muted. Because if you watch any other debates that he's been in where the mic is not muted, he adds
wrong, false, But
liar.
If you watch, but going back and watching the president, the debates with Hillary Clinton, of course, and you're seeing him. He's not terribly vicious. I mean, in the way that he was against Ted Cruz, the way that he was against Rand Paul, the way that he was against Jeb Bush, much more reserved going after Hillary Clinton and much more pointed at certain moments. So, and I think that a lot of people probably got in his head at the time, like, you cannot come across to Hillary Clinton like you're attacking her. Mm-hmm. People will say that you're a mean man going after a woman.
Well, and I was kind of surprised you didn't see a lot of people saying that after that debate. I mean, he actually did a very good job of countering what she was saying, but not attacking.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us on this special coverage. The presidential debate is tonight, starts in about 26 minutes in Philadelphia, my hometown of Philadelphia. And, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I was just in Philly the other day, and it's just unbelievable to see the degradation of this city, my home city. And you walk down, or just drive down Kensington Avenue, or go through some of the areas that have you're watching the rot of these liberal cities. Nowhere is it more apparent than the crime-ridden rot that you've seen in Philadelphia or places like Chicago, or you've lived up in Portland, right?
Yeah,
or near Portland.
Yeah,
right?
they literally the fire department in Portland, Oregon said they get a call every 30 minutes to go deal with a fentanyl overdose. So the resources are so thin because they're dealing with that actual calls are getting delayed now.
So thank you guys so much for joining us here on this special coverage. Feel free to weigh in our chat room, and we'll be kind of watching all of that unfold here. So just to kind of point a couple of points of order as you're kind of dealing with the chat room. You do what you need to do.
Yeah, I got to get locals going. Yeah. So
you get all that. You get all that going. We good, Philip?
And if people see a black screen when David's talking, it's not because I hate him. It's because I keep hitting his camera from the normal show because it's just reflex. So every time he starts talking, I cut to a camera that's not on. So that's what's going on there. I don't hate him. I just
that's all right. Well, we'll let him do what he's got to do here. So you can take it off of that for now, so he can deal with what he's got to deal with, and I'll just talk to you guys for a minute here while David's dealing with all the behind the scenes stuff. And Philip's doing a great job. This is a last minute sort of idea over the past few days. We said we really would love to come in here and hang out with all of you guys and just have kind of an informal gathering tonight to watch this presidential debate. This could really be the only presidential debate. We'll see how this goes tonight. This could really probably be the only presidential debate. And you might be asking yourself, well, how in the world did this get chosen on ABC? Like, why is ABC the choice for this? In fact, well, it's because President Biden chose it. That, according to Byron York, that President Biden picked ABC because he thought it would offer him the friendliest and most agreeable audience back when he was picking the forums for these debates. Of course, he also chose CNN. We know how that one went for him as well. But ABC, of course, is his choice. So that's a holdover from President Biden's decision to have a favorable audience. David Muir, what's her name? Lindsay? I don't know. I don't know any of the ABC, the corporate anchors anymore. But do you think David Muir is going to ask some tough questions of Kamala Harris?
No.
Or... Well, we'll see what he asks. Here, let me just throw this out there. What questions do you want asked from these, of these candidates tonight?
I think my most important question that I want to hear is, you've been in power for 4 years. Why haven't you done any of the things you're saying you're going to do when you get in office? Like, I promise I'm going to do all of this stuff. And some of it she could literally do right now and hasn't.
Right. She could, well, because who's running the country? It's certainly not President Biden.
Right.
It's certainly not President Biden. So good to see all of our friends. Oh, I just hit a button here. And then maybe, can you also bring up here the live stream on the chat on these monitors as well?
Yeah. The locals?
No, The YouTube and Rumble.
So
that's old.
Oh.
So, if you're just joining us, thank you for joining us on this special night of coverage of watching the presidential debate. Again, probably the only presidential debate. And look, there's a lot of questions that President Trump has to answer as well tonight about surrounding himself with a lot of deep state swamp rats, quite honestly. Concerns that he could be surrounding himself again with the likes of Mike Pompeo, a man who wanted to assassinate Julian Assange, a liar, a criminal. You're going to choose Mike Pompeo to be your, somehow part of your administration. Again, some of these swamp rats that have been around here for a long time, you're going to bring those individuals back into your fold? Absolutely not. And he said he learned his lesson. President Trump said he learned his lesson when he got to Washington. He didn't know a lot about Washington, D.C., a lot of people picking in his brain that he had to then become, he had to include these individuals. He didn't have a lot of people to associate himself with. So he was listening to a lot of suggestions for people to take part in his cabinet and surround himself. It didn't go well. And the draining of the swamp did not happen the way that we had hoped that it would. So, yeah, we will have to see what that will look like, a new Trump administration. And my little girl, come around here over here. My little girl just got home from dance class, but she's shaking all the cameras here as well. This is my little girl. This is my little girl, Eve. Yeah, my little nugget. How was dance class?
Good.
Good. Okay, so you got to go do your homework, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, got your homework? Okay, go do your homework, and then I'm going to put you to bed after the debate tonight.
She's on top of it, Dad.
Okay, go. Go. She's on top of it. You can, but I'd rather you, if you want to, just go turn on the light in there and you can do it. So it's an informal night around here. Can we see the stream? Okay, it's up. Okay. Just making sure we're good to go here. All right, so let me just check in here on the chat room.
There's
over
locals
here.
Chat for you.
There's locals. Okay, good to see. Let's see. World 1982 says, I won't think it'll be a fair debate. Is it the same rules when Trump debates Biden? Oh, no, they've adjusted them now. They've absolutely adjusted the rules. And so, it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, they pretty much, and it's kind of good that they did, that Biden and Trump negotiated those rules the last time, because those same rules pretty much carried over this time. Which benefits Trump in this case. I don't know that it did with Biden, but it definitely does in this case, because she won't be able to use the "I'm speaking."
Right.
I was like,
"I'm speaking."
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, and we've seen recent polls. Of course, we're seeing a lot of different interesting polls right now. We saw the New York Times Siena poll, which just came out yesterday, or in the past 48 hours or so, and it was an absolute disaster for the Harris campaign. So think about this. She's been holed up in Pittsburgh practicing debate prep for the past 6 days, doing no campaign events. I mean, you literally have 55 days or so until Election Day. You've wasted now 5 crucial days trying to get out. You're not campaigning. Mm-hmm. You're not out in Butler, Pennsylvania. You're not in crucial swing state areas. You're not going to Ohio. You're in a hotel.
And you aired 30 minutes of an hour-long recorded interview with CNN with Dana Bash, and didn't even get to see the whole thing. That's all she's done.
That's it. And it was a totally contrived.
Oh, yeah.
Interview, her and the coach. No one wants to see that. What they really want to see. So anyway, part of the New York Times Siena poll, which I found fascinating, is that, of course, Americans don't know anything about her. Mm-hmm. That was the response. They don't know what she stands for. And so for so long, she said, I'm the last one in the room with President Biden. It's the Harris-Biden team. We are one. We are unified. Ask Americans, where does she come down on any of these policies? And
the thing is, I don't think she cares. I think she just believes that she can win not being Trump, because her policies just got posted on the website, I believe, this week. Her policies.
About 48 hours ago.
So it's like you have all these people, and you have these people showing up at these events or whatever, And they obviously don't really even know what they're supporting. They're just supporting her because she's not Trump and because of all the ideology that goes in that side with the identity politics.
So we will say, look, maybe these debates don't matter much, that people have already sort of made up their minds, but she is a total, new variable in this race where no one knew her at all beforehand. Or if they did, they had an incredibly low favorability of her. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had Democrats making fun of her, mocking her. You had Jimmy Fallon, you had Jimmy Kimmel, you had nightly shows making fun of her, how she's an incredible drag on the ticket for Biden.
She was rated one of the worst vice presidents in U.S. history.
Yeah.
Percentage-wise.
Right. So now she has to come out. And try to appeal in some new way to a whole new crop of people watching in a primetime debate. I'm going to go on record. I'm going to say this will be one of the most watched presidential debates in the last decade.
Right. Well, one, because Trump people, the Republicans want to see her fail, and two, because the Democrats want to see her defeat Trump, but they also want to see her.
Right. They want to see her actually speak. Now, you'll recall she got slaughtered in debates among Democratic candidates, going toe-to-toe with the likes of Tulsi Gabbard and others. So she's had a chance to go toe-to-toe with Democrats and got slaughtered on the debate stage, where she's received 0 votes. You have members of the Democratic Party who may be opting not to vote at all. Maybe they hate Donald Trump, but they're so offended that they have no say in this voting process during the primaries. Black Lives Matter and others who've come out and said, we fought our whole lives to win the right to vote. And you've just taken our right to vote off the table by hand selecting a candidate and installing this individual. And you're telling us now that we have to like this person? So,
well, I mean, also, to be fair, she did get the warmonger vote. She's got Dick Cheney. She got, all of these John Bolton, like these people coming up. We want Harris. Why?
Right.
Why would they want her?
Why would they? Yeah, exactly. Why would they? Exactly, they want her because they want to continue what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East. They want an extension of that from the military-industrial complex perspective. So, thank you guys so much for joining us on this special evening here. David, our producer, is in the studio today, helping out, running all things behind the scenes. Natalie is off dealing with kids getting transported from a swim practice to a dance class to back home.
I swear you are the busiest people I know. It's like always running somewhere.
Got like a window of time. Like, can you throw a hamburger at a kid? That's kind of what it is right now. So Philip's running things behind the scenes here, and we are getting moments away, about 15 minutes away or so from this big debate in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, my home city. And, it's just so sad to see the amount of crime, the liberal policies, the corruption, of course, that's taken over. Corruption has always been a big problem in Philadelphia, but the drug crisis has been absolutely devastating to that city. Just again, drive down Kensington Avenue, you'll see the walking zombies.
Well, and a lot of times when you see footage, like when they're talking about this epidemic, they show footage from Philly. I mean, that's one of the main areas that they cover because it is literally like driving down, and Portland was the same way. It's like driving down a street and just seeing a bunch of zombies on the side of the road.
Yeah, it is. So on locals, let's say, Little Ep says, watching from Australia, got to be good entertainment. It is. So it's like bright and early in the morning for you guys over there in Australia.
What are they going to be voting for?
Exactly. Can you guys vote in Australia? Well, see, that's the great thing about America, that we open our borders up. You don't even have to be a citizen to vote.
If you just come in either the northern or southern side, you hear about that guy that's taking advantage of the system. He lives in San Diego. He's been going out and coming back in and getting $2,000 every time.
Right.
And made about $8,000 this month. So you guys, if in Australia, if you want to, come over and vote,
welcome you in.
Yeah.
T-minus 13 minutes, Delicate Flower says. Seattle is bad as well. So thank you guys for your super chats here. We got a nice super chat from Bilal. Thinking a politician actually cares about you and has your best interest in mind is no different than falling in love with a stripper. Will Clement. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, there's a lot to have Trump on the show, and that's something we're working on doing, but there's a lot of questions I have for President Trump on his, yes, we could talk all about, I didn't start any new wars, Great. Well, there's still 9 that the United States is involved with, and you expanded the drone program. So you expanded additional drone programs. You created a space force.
Assassinated Soleimani.
Yes. So, look, we're all fair here on this show, and so you want to expand Space Force, expand the military industrial complex. How much more are you going to do as president to expand the military industrial complex up to about almost $1 trillion now, a budget for the military, and America is crumbling? What if we took a huge chunk of that, downsized, as RFK Jr. wanted to do, and eliminate these military bases around the world? Yeah. Over 900 American military bases around the world. For what?
I was doing some research because I wanted to know how many troops we still had, if any, in Afghanistan. And I read that we had 700 bases in Afghanistan.
Well, now so when we talk about a base, as we have in Syria, you could say it's a base, right? You can get into some semantics about how large it actually is, because it can be little, like sort of depots almost, but over 900 military bases. So you can get into semantics. It's probably maybe 2,000 then if you include all of these little,
depots and where there's storage depots and all this other stuff.
No, Pizza is not here in the studio tonight. Just Grover.
I almost brought her, but
Grover's just walking around, hanging out.
Yeah.
Good to see all of you guys in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. And so
if you were moderating the debate, what is one question that you would really want to ask each one of them? If they're like, okay, you can ask them anything you want. What would you ask Trump and what would you ask Kamala?
Well, I think to me, one of the most important issues facing the United States of America, apart from the economy that most Americans feel, but the total degradation of the United States is right now being felt on a couple of levels. So I'd talk about the U.S. dollar, the decline of the U.S. dollar as a hegemony, U.S. dollar dominance around the world. What is your plan for that? Because we have levered American military force around the world in order to push the United States dollar, the petrodollar, on all of these countries. What is your plan to replace that? We know that quietly President Trump is very supportive of Bitcoin and sort of stable coins. Is that the end around the U.S. dollar? So I talk about the U.S. dollar, but human trafficking and our wide open borders and the sexual exploitation of all of these children. 500,000 children that are missing, gone, presumably dead, that have come across the United States border, and it's all being facilitated by the Department of Homeland Security and these non-governmental organizations like Catholic Charities and others that are making millions and millions of dollars from U.S. government grants to be able to carry all of this out. How is this not the biggest scandal in American history? I don't know. Well, I know why. Because people like ABC News that are carrying tonight's debate will never ask those questions. Question number 1, Kamala Harris, you are border czar. Under your watch over the past 3 years, estimates are over 20 million illegal immigrants have come into the United States of America. 20 million. And even those estimates are pretty low. We know from our experts like J.G. Carroll and others who know those catch and release numbers, what ICE numbers and all of those things. Where are they? Where are they? You have no accounting of this. This happened on your watch. Where are these people in the United States?
Well, and you know what they say? It was Trump separating families.
Oh, right. Of course,
it was only Trump that separated families. So they don't think that that's an issue in this administration.
Go ahead, Philip.
What I would like to see out of either candidate is I would just ask them, outline a policy, just a policy that you have that you plan to implement, just one of them. Don't tell me what the problem is. We already know what the problem is. Don't complain about it. Don't just regurgitate it. Actually lay something out, just one thing.
Right.
And I have a feeling that's not going to happen.
Right. And when you ask Kamala anything about the economy, she's like, bread's more expensive. This is more expensive. She gives no plan on how she's going to even touch the economy. Do we even know she understands the economy at all? We already see what the Biden administration, so the people that are around Biden right now are most likely going to be the same people around Kamala when she gets in, and the economy sucks right now.
If you're just joining us, we are moments away from the presidential debate. Kamala Harris, President Trump, Vice President Kamala Harris, President Trump in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. About 8 minutes until showtime there. Thank you guys for joining us. We are usually live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time doing our live show. Natalie is not here right now. My wife, my co-host, she is off ferreting kids around all night tonight, our children. David, our producer, who's normally in his studio, is here tonight running things here locally so we can keep all of these chat windows up. So we've got YouTube, we've got Rumble, we've got Locals, we've got everything kind of going simultaneously here so we can watch all of that plus the feed. And Philip behind the scenes is controlling everything, all of the cameras and everything.
Could I by chance get your power cable for this? Just so this one
doesn't... You can steal my power cable?
Yeah. I'm going to do like Natalie.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, bring your own.
Another here's a great point from Freedom Forever in our Locals chat says, according to Scott Ritter, the most important issue is nuclear weapons. Everybody is welcome to attend the rally against nuclear weapons on Saturday, September 28th in Kingston, New York. Yeah, he says, Ritter says, and he said this on our show, right, that if the world blows up with nuclear bombs, no other issue matters. Exactly. And so one of my questions would be around NATO and the expansion of NATO right up to Russia's doorstep. NATO has lost its usefulness. At what point are you going to get out of NATO, try to end NATO? Can we, it's gone beyond being any kind of defensive organization. Now, of course, it's an offensive organization, openly providing weapons and attacking inside of Russia. It's lost all defensive arguments, and we're literally like months away from nuclear war. We keep agitating.
And Trump is the only one who has even talked about shutting down NATO.
Yeah. Oh, Kamala Harris, are you kidding me? She's a deep state puppet. She will expand NATO. Mm-hmm. She will push to make sure that we are permanently in Ukraine for the next 10 years. It'll be another Afghanistan. And I really want to push these. I would love to push these guys on how they're going to continue these 9 different wars that we're in right now. We should end all of them and reinvest that money into the United States, but we won't because the military industrial complex runs everything. I would also ask Trump about his relationships with these deep state swamp rats like Mike Pompeo and all these people that he said he was going to kick out before, but he didn't. So, you had an opportunity too. And also I would love to ask Trump about his love of Operation Warp Speed and
he still brags about that.
And the COVID vaccines. Okay. How many more episodes do we need to do here on this show that we can't even feature and talk about here on YouTube, but we have to go to Rumble to do it because of the amount of people who are affected with negatively or died as a result of all of this?
Well, I saw a really good interview with RFK Jr. and I think he was talking to Tucker, and he said he had a conversation with Donald Trump about the deep state that he could not get rid of. Like he's like, I had no idea when I got in there what it was going to be like. I've never governed before, and so when he got in there, he didn't realize how powerful the deep state was to keep him from doing some of the things he wanted to do. That was what RFK Jr. said. So, I mean, I kind of believe it because where's our president? We have not had a president in 4 months? And the country is still running. Yeah, 3 years. Yeah. But it's still running. Like things are still getting done. Like who is running this country? Those are the people that Trump was fighting the entire time.
Right. And they're going to continue to be here. I mean, I like the idea of cleaning house, but we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. So we are 4 minutes away from the big presidential debate in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is probably going to be the only debate, by the way, between these two people. I'd be shocked, if they continue this. Kamala Harris has been in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the past 6 days, holed up in a hotel, practicing. She's had a number of different individuals dressing in different MAGA-related outfits, trying to debate her. One of the big problems is that she's trying to also memorize. So she's trying to memorize responses. Mm-hmm. And that is, to anyone who's ever given public speeches, like to memorize, because at the moment you're flustered, the moment you're thrown off of your memorization, it's a disaster.
I know I talk about this all the time, but when I was with the Ron Paul campaign, his staff was always like, Ron, let's go over some of the questions. He'd be like, no. I do not want to know what's coming because I want to answer honestly. So he would literally go in the corner with his iPad and surf Facebook before a debate. He would just sit there and scroll through things because he didn't want to have predetermined answers. He wanted to answer off the cuff, which is what they should do.
Right.
I mean, I understand debate prep and things like that, like some of the questions that could come, but memorizing your answer, that's disingenuous. It's you're basically just talking points at that point, which is what they do.
And they'll give you little lines. I mean, but President Trump, I don't think even uses any of them. I mean, I feel like I can't recall a time where I was like, that was a line that someone gave him.
Right.
You know, these are things that he's been saying out on the campaign trail. It's rare that you get one of those memorable lines, like a President Reagan line when he's asked about his age.
Right.
You know, and he says, President Reagan says, I will not let, you know, youth and in the inexperience of my competitor to get in the way of this race.
Right.
You know,
and you know Trump's campaign managers and everything. Some of the stuff he says, they're back there going, "Oh,
of course,
no."
But that's a funny thing with Trump, you know. And I've known a lot of people around the Trump team for so many years, and they often do that. But then it's like a few days later, they're glad that they didn't have that, you know, they're glad that they didn't get in the way of it because he often, love him or hate him, however you feel about him, he understands and he knows how to sort of play to a camera. He knows how to play to a crowd, and he certainly knows how to play the media.
Yes.
And I remember Governor Huckabee telling me he was so frustrated. He said, I just can't get any airtime. I can't, when he was running against Trump, he's like, I can't get any airtime because every time I try to put out a policy issue or talk about something, everyone wants to talk about Trump on TV attacking Ted Cruz about this thing. And Huckabee was like, hey, I'm over here. You know, I want to talk about this, but now we're not going to talk about it because as Governor Huckabee told me one time, Trump just sucks all of the air out of the room.
Yeah, he owned the airwaves, and the mainstream media loved it because they were making bank on Trump during that.
Yeah. Nikki R. in our locals chat says memorizing your answers equals puppets.
And one thing I will say that I really hope Trump does is sticks with, because he has a tendency, like they're going to be listening for lies. And who knows if they're going to be fact checking him in real time. I know that if he says anything that's like remotely false, they'll probably try to hold him to account, but probably not Kamala. I mean, I hope it's not that way. I hope they are fair and try to hold them both to account for any lies that they tell. But they're saying Trump's going to, like, there are people talking about having lie counters and playing a drinking game when he's lying.
Right.
You know? Oh,
yeah. Matt Taibbi, of course, has a drinking game that he sent out today. This is actually funny if I can find it here off the top of my head. Kamala Harris will have a miniature podium during tonight's debate. And the Harris team has requested it, afraid that she'll look tiny compared to Trump. So she's going to have a tiny podium.
She could be like towering over it, like she's going to be down by her waist.
She said, can you raise the podium up a little bit? The smaller podium. I'm
great. Wearing heels and have a miniature podium.
So we're just moments away. We're just still waiting here for the debate to kick off in Philadelphia. We'll take it as soon as it is live. And popping popcorn right now. Leanne Trevino says she's popping popcorn right now.
Nice.
Good for you. So here's the official drinking game for tonight. If anyone's drinking, I have a coffee here, so I'm not going to be drinking. But drink every time the words felon, extreme threat to democracy, or for the people pop up. And if Trump uses the words communist, socialist, radicalist, or Marxist, double shot for the word tampon. All right. So let's kick it off. Here is the presidential debate.
I'm going to be on the floor in about 10 minutes then. I'm going to go grab
Exactly.
Do you have control of audio, Philip?
Negative. I don't know. I have a button.
The ABC News presidential debate starts right now. Right now.
All right, let's take it.
This is an ABC News special. The most consequential campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Historic.
Yes, I do have control.
Yep, it's working.
ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates
what Harris wanted.
who have never met.
No,
He chose to deliver the final closing statement.
No audience to laugh at her comments there. By the way, doesn't David Muir look like he was like I don't know. Well, it came out of like central casting for like news anchors. That's going to be tonight's.
And one thing she said is that this is very consequential, but only if they ask the right questions. Right.
Right. All right.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time,
she is really
so that
nervous.
those young families can afford to buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very
this is a smart move from her debate preppers to tell people ahead of time what you're going to hear.
Bringing us together, knowing than
tell people ahead of time what you're going to hear in the debate.
And I pledge to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes.
Philip.
She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers'
You lecture people
rights.
about the workforce right now? Americans are working 2 and 3 jobs right now. The jobs report that just came out last week was an absolute disaster. American workers right now being replaced, losing full-time jobs in favor of part-time jobs, and the part-time jobs that many of these people are being replaced by are illegal immigrants. You're going to lecture us about the workforce right now? And we should also talk about the merchandise trade deficit that we have right now. Ms. Harris, the trade deficit means that we are literally we are taking in way more goods from other countries right now, 6-1 from us sending out merchandise to other countries right now. Ms. Harris, just a point of order. Continue.
Exclamation point. When we know that she was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says...
He's really out of it.
Says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. And now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next.
Can I just say, like, the fact that he overturned Roe v. Wade and turned it onto the states, if a state decides to do something, that's not Trump's abortion ban, that's the state's, right? She keeps saying it's his abortion ban, but it's not.
Right.
That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
It irritates me, too, that they're letting her get away with calling it Project 2025 his. He has denounced it so many times, and it's not, he has Agenda 47, right? So why are they letting her get away with that?
Yeah. Well, because they're fact-checking just what they want to fact-check, just like allowing babies to be born after and then continue with abortions. And that is actually part of law in certain states. So they're fact-checking and then actually pushing a lie on top of the fact-check. But
thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond. But I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why In every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an
Finally.
issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across
Democrats love talking about abortion for 30 minutes. All right, let's get to immigration. Now I really want to hear about it.
Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us
It
to
feels like
stem
she
the
had these
flow of
questions.
fentanyl
Do you know
coming
what I mean?
into the
Of
United
course.
States.
She
I
does
know
not
there's so
respond
many
like
families
this.
watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating.
She's laughing. It's true.
They're
It's true.
eating the pets
I was waiting for this.
of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
So I love that ABC is, it's literally Trump versus Harris versus the
This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually
and we kind of knew that's how it would be.
Of course.
Of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney,
warmongers,
and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney.
I don't think that's the win you think it is.
If you want to really know the inside track
Dick
on
Cheney
who the former
supports
president
me.
is,
You keep saying Cheney. I don't think that means what you think it means.
With him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They
Yes.
didn't include
We've
the
covered
worst
that here
cities.
on the show.
They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like the number of 818,000
We've interviewed
jobs that
former
they said
data
they created
analysts
turned
from
out
the
to be a
FBI
fraud.
right here on the
President Trump,
show,
thank you.
and that is
I'll let you
true.
respond, President
They
Well, I
are
think this is
false
so rich.
numbers. I'm not supporting what
Coming
you know.
from someone who has
I'm
been
just pointing out that that is a
prosecuted
bullshit story.
for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members
doing
of
it
our
right
military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So
Wow.
my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump,
she just looked right at the camera when she said that.
$1 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens.
She did.
And a great
She wanted to
father,
ban
and I learned a
fracking.
lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Does that sound familiar?
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert soil.
President Trump, we have a lot of
These are not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of the president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured.
Would you want to be in the room with her reminiscing on that day with AOC?
And understand,
Those two?
Former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember.
A lie. A lie.
When it
Once
came
again,
to the
a lie,
Proud
which has
Boys,
been
a militia.
absolutely debunked.
The
but
president
okay.
said, the former
We'll
president
see if
said,
ABC
stand back
corrects
and
her
stand
the way that
by.
they corrected Trump.
Right.
It'd be
So for
interesting to see.
everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back.
In the
Let's
auto industry.
chart a course for the future.
More lies,
and not go
right.
backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill.
I got some ice cream.
If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate,
this is just an attack on Trump. These questions, everyone.
You, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders. And we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris,
I got to say, he's on fire tonight.
He didn't say that he lost
in my opinion.
So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States. And
except for
world
Mexico.
leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
Except for New Mexico.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban
Biden blew it up then.
Said it. Yeah. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed, and now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held.
So Kamala Harris has yet to be fact-checked one time by ABC News.
Said, quote,
well, all these questions have been a setup.
But you added, quote,
well, remember, ABC News colluded with the Clinton campaign, of course, over the Russia collusion story. ABC was complicit in this. So is it any shock
now an estimated
that they're
40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100
fact-checking left and right, but not fact-checking anything that Kamala Harris has to say.
Netanyahu said there's not
so let's listen to this. They will fawn and love, fall all over Israel. Let's listen.
How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population, because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President
Harris, they haven't pushed back on her once, not once.
And she's the one
of course not.
that caused it. That's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right. Wow. They're going to take a little pee break. So far, I think it's interesting. So, I mean, if we're just going to look at the moderators, right, in a debate, why are the moderators getting involved in fact-checking President Trump on things? And when they're fact-checking him, as, Kamala Harris comes out and talks about bloodbath, mentions they're very fine people on both sides, which has been widely debunked to the Charlottesville hoax. What was said and tweeted on January 6th. No one wants you to see that tweet. We are a party of law and order. Be peaceful. March on the Capitol peacefully. We are the party of law and order. None of that gets mentioned. No. And then, when she spews these lies, the ABC News doesn't do anything back about it. Well,
and also just listen to the questions themselves. We're going to talk about truth, knowing that's just directly at Donald Trump. Everything they're asking is directly aimed at one of the controversies around Donald Trump. They've not aimed, I mean, other than the one question that she did ask about her, her flip-flopping, which, she had already covered with Dana. She answered that same question. Right. Haven't changed or whatever. Not whatever the word is.
Yeah.
But the questions are setting Donald Trump up.
I wish, though, I could have heard from President Trump answering the question that ABC News asked, which was, how are you going to marshal your, ICE, local law enforcement, National Guard to have this mass deportation? This is a big question that we've talked about with Colonel Douglas McGregor on the show. He said he hopes he's serious about it. He appears to be serious about it. But how exactly are you going to pull that off? Because I've warned, here's exactly what the liberal media is going to do, is that as soon as these forces go around and start to round up these criminals and start to send them back to Honduras and Nicaragua and Venezuela and all of these other places, you're going to see wall-to-wall news coverage about how it's like Trump's Gestapo. They're coming door to door, and you better watch out because Trump's police force is coming door to door, and that's how the media is going to play it. So I hope they have a very detailed plan on how they're going to pull this off.
Who did they call the deporter-in-chief? President Obama. Obama deported more people in his presidency than any other president currently. So obviously it can be done.
Well, it was being done. And as J.J. Carroll, a former 24-year veteran of Customs and Border Protection, has said on our show multiple times, while he was there for 24 years, President Trump, to him, these are his words, not mine, was the greatest border president we'd ever had. And why did he say that? Why did J.J. Carroll say that? It's because he was able to do his job. The Border Patrol was able to do their jobs, and they were able to have deportations. They were only a few hundred coming in per week, and they were able to capture those individuals, and they were returned. And one of the reasons they were returned and the countries accepted them back is because President Trump threatened those countries by withholding money. He went to those countries like Venezuela and others, and he said, you will take these individuals back. And Venezuela said, no, we're not taking our criminals back. Sorry, we sent them to America. And President Trump told them, great, then we are going to withhold all the money that we're sending to you and the aid that we're sending to you. And then suddenly they said, all right, we'll take them back. Those are JJ's words, not mine.
And also, like, they're the only part of the bill that they say that Trump blocked that they'll cover is that you're stopping 1,500 Border Patrol agents, because it's like there's so many people coming in that they're like, we need more Border Patrol agents. But that's the only part of the bill they focus on. They don't focus on the actual content of the bill, which is how many people they would still be allowing, like 5,000 a day or something like that would be allowed to come in still in that bill.
It's unbelievable.
And they didn't even say anything about that to Kamala. It's like she said that. So
we're on a break right now. So they're taking a commercial break right now in the presidential debate in Philadelphia. They'll probably have a few minutes here. So as soon as the debate starts again, we will bring it back to you here, guys.
Go ahead. Real quick, I'm still in a position. I would just like somebody to answer a question. I would just like. I would like them to answer.
I wanted that question answered, specifically on how are you going to marshal all of these individuals. I mean, Kamala lied about fracking. She said, I never said that I was against fracking. She absolutely has said that she was against fracking. When Trump said that you are for defunding the police, she said, I never said that. There's a radio interview where she absolutely openly supports the defunding of police. You can all go and find it for yourself right now if you want to. But and the ABC News fact checkers are so quick to jump on Trump. They don't have access to the defund the police information. We here at Redacted have that ready at the go and are able to do that. Anyway, Philadelphia, from the city of brotherly love, the presidential debate. Here it is, President Trump, Vice President Kamala Harris, and we are back. Let's watch.
Tonight, we're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for $250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland.
Like a true warmonger.
And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who
Polish people think the war is a
lunch.
disaster. Ask any Polish person.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight.
Destroyed
Afghanistan
their
came up
country
in
as
the
well.
last hour.
You have
I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one.
Thanks, ABC, for all of your help.
When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. And
it's
the
our
American
beacon.
people
Our beacon is overshadowing
have a right to
them.
rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I wanted to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the
His
Afghan
warmongering
government.
national security advisor.
He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we
can I get a fact check on that, please?
I
Respected
would
world
say that,
leaders.
I would say it's really important place for presidents. People don't give a shit.
Former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, 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 and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's,
you got to ask a union member.
Tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States.
If you weren't fed these questions, how would you know all of these facts about this man? You know what I mean?
Right. Of course.
Want better than this.
Or debate
Want
preppers.
someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a
She's
neighbor.
A post-racial
we don't
human
want
being.
a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism
here comes the burden.
about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about
Where were you the last 3
allowing
years?
people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
Thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has a plan to not allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to
President Trump.
No, the former president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that, and you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan.
John McCain.
And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes?
Is an insurance scam.
As I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
In terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
You made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water.
But no questions about fentanyl.
You call climate change an
Let's talk about climate change.
The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy while we have also increased increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
I will say Linda's questions compared to David's have seemed a little bit more, you know, like not just like directly going after Trump.
Yeah. Well, you know, thank you guys all for subscribing and being a part of our channel here. We appreciate it. We're usually live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and we're going to be back here with the closing statements on the presidential debate in just a few minutes. Natalie is off tonight. She's been running our kids around all around town. David, our producer, sitting in here tonight, running the studio behind the scenes here. Philip also calling all the shots and taking all the shots. You know, it's interesting when you look at the amount of time that they spend on these questions. We have to spend 10 minutes on Israel. Of course, we always have to spend 10 minutes on Israel because this is an American presidential debate about the future of the American economy and the American government and our wide open southern borders and our fentanyl crisis that's destroying the United States. And of course, we have to focus on Israel. And then we have to focus on climate change, as she says, a subject that is near and dear to so many hearts and minds of children. Yeah, you know why it is? Because if you go to any of these schools, they cram it down their throat and they make these kids terrified at 5 years old that a giant tsunami. They make them watch David Attenborough specials where, you know, the earth is crumbling under their feet and the sky is falling, and they scare these kids to death. So they get them indoctrinated onto this plan about the climate. As someone in our chat just said, yeah, you know what? The climate's changing every day. Every day. And
has been for millions of years.
Right. There is. And we had the big report this past week that came out. There's no connection at all. Zero between human beings and climate change. Zero. And of course, they won't cover that and they won't bring that up. But that's got to be a major focus of a presidential debate.
I absolutely love that guy. I don't remember where he was from, but where he was like talking about climate change, and he's like, if there's global warming, since when? Right. Like, how far back do you have to go to actually see that it's not true?
Ian Plimer. Yeah. Ian Plimer, right? Yeah. We featured Ian Plimer's great research on our show plenty of times. He's like, when someone says the climate is warming, you always have to ask them the question, since when? Since when? Since the little ice age? Has it warmed? Yes. Anyway, it's been remarkable to see the amount of time that they waste on subjects. No discussion at all about human trafficking in the United States, which under the Biden administration has absolutely skyrocketed. Hundreds of thousands of children being sold into sex trafficking operations, which is being run by the Department of Homeland Security and Alejandro Mayorkas. And all of these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations that are facilitating the largest human trafficking operation in the world. The United States government is overseeing the largest human trafficking operation in the world, with millions of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. Very little questions on that. And no pressing back on her on that question.
On
about
anything. And the thing is, it's like, they're not asking any substantive questions. They're just asking things that they are allowed to ask. It's like, okay, you can't ask about this. You can't ask about that. You can't bring up the drug thing because of the pharmaceutical industry, because this is brought to you by Pfizer, right? I'm surprised that they're not before every question. Okay, this question is brought to you by, Pfizer.
Moderna. Yeah. Our climate question is brought to you by, who knows? Microsoft.
Mobil, Exxon, or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, it's just so, like, these are not the questions. Like, it's pandering to a specific amount of people, sure, but like, these aren't the questions we want to know. We're not getting anything about policy. We're not getting any answers on anything. It's just a lot of platitudes and attacks, and this one's lying and that one's lying. It's I
would have appreciated if it was just 45 minutes of one of them talking, 45 minutes of the other talking, and call it a night. Because that's all it is. It's just split up.
Yeah.
We're
facts and common sense. It's disgusting. Exactly. Thank you guys, though, for subscribing and being part of our channel here. This is a special edition tonight. Normally we're live at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, covering the stories the mainstream media ignores. But yes, there's a commercial break right now, and then they're going to come back with their closing statements. I think Kamala, I'm no fan of her at all. I think she's a disaster, but I think she is doing exactly what she needs to do. And let's listen into her closing statements right now.
I believe in what we can do together. That is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Okay. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years
cue the violin music,
back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump.
It's almost like you had 3 years to invest in.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
Boom.
They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like, we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David
You
Muir.
think that changed any minds?
How many of you, I see so many people saying nothing changed at all. You know, I think, well, let's just talk about who this debate was for. It was for swing voters, right? Like, it was for swing voters, and you're in the state of Pennsylvania, which of course is a famous swing state, traditionally blue Philadelphia, and then of course traditionally blue Pittsburgh. And then I'm from Pennsylvania. We get to say this. You have in the center of the state, you have Pennsyltucky, right? And you have, to me, you know, then you have the salt of the earth, like the hardworking Pennsylvanians who live in the rest of the state. And so this is for the swing voters who are going to be affected by fracking. What's going to happen in the Rust Belt, down through West Virginia and in Virginia, and then down into Kentucky and Ohio. And the blue collar workers, like the John Deere factory that's now going out of business and moving to Mexico, and these other manufacturing.
Caterpillar in Indiana.
So yeah, exactly. So Caterpillar. So this debate was not for people who have had their minds made up for many, many months. This debate, of course, was for the swing voters, for people who might be undecided. There are 100 million Americans who don't vote, and I see people in the comments saying, so what we learned about this is you have both of these people are pro-Israel. That they're going to continue with these policies of war and expanding the military and NATO expansion. Maybe the only difference on war front is that Kamala Harris is definitely wants to go to war with Russia. Yeah, like she actively wants to go to war with Russia and
Iran.
NATO.
I mean, they've been very harsh on Iran.
Yeah. So I think this, I don't know if it swayed anybody on this front. We'll ask you guys in the comments. Do you think that this swayed you one way or the other? Were any of you guys watching right now on the fence about either of these candidates, voting or not voting? Maybe you're one of the 100 million who doesn't vote and doesn't think that these parties speak for you at all. The uniparty, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, I was actually impressed with Trump tonight. That's not me, Philip. He did it again. I was actually impressed with his performance because I make it clear that I'm not a huge Trump fan, right? But I feel like he was asking the questions. He wasn't all over the place like he usually is as much. I mean, he still kind of was.
Well, that's kind of funny because that's like. Oh, sorry. I'll make my point. Finish your point.
Oh, I was just to say, I just feel like the moderators. Like you said, this was Kamala Harris, the moderators versus Trump.
Right.
That's what I felt. I felt like he did a good job thwarting that. Not taking it to just answering the questions better than I thought he was going to.
Go ahead, Philip.
Even though they were aimed at him.
Yeah, I felt the exact opposite. I felt like he didn't answer a single question, and that was starting to frustrate the piss out of me because I want to hear people's policies, and I feel like every question he was asked, he just answered something completely different, just like the thing he wanted to say. And
yeah, so I agree. I agree he didn't specifically answer the question, but the thing is he did because they weren't asking the right questions. He was filling the holes with things that mattered to people is what I'm saying.
Right. Let's talk about some of the questions, right? Just off the top of my head, David Muir asked him, you basically incited January 6th. You incited what happened at the Capitol and made your marchers march to the Capitol, and then attacked officers. So that's the question, right? That's the question to Trump. And then Trump, he has to then go on the defensive and answer it that way, right? No, that's not what happened, and he has to go on the defensive. But I agree with you, Philip, in part. There was parts of where I wanted him to answer the question that David Muir directly asked him about how are you going to actually deport all of these millions of illegal immigrants? And he turned it right around and pointed at the Kamala and has let in millions of illegal immigrants. But he never answered the question on the roundup force. And I would love to see them talk about that because to me, that's a very important question that he didn't answer. How are you going to get ICE agents, local law enforcement, National Guard, and how are you going to organize this? And are you going to have Tom Holland, who was in charge of ICE before? This is a massive military operation. Colonel Douglas McGregor on our show said, that's a massive military operation. In order to pull this off, how are you going to do it? And Colonel McGregor said, I hope you have competent people around you. to carry out this massive military operation. It's like a D-Day landing.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have to deal with a mean liberal media, which is going to come after you, calling you like the, deportation in chief, whatever. And you're also going to have to carry out this massive military operation, like landing on the beaches of Normandy to pull this thing off. How are you going to do it? It's a great question.
Yeah. And think about the disservice that that these so-called journalists that did this debate, if these people weren't trying to get access and actually would ask a question, and then if Trump or Kamala doesn't answer it, or they throw out some unfactual thing, they ask them again, they hold their feet to the fire, they make sure they answer the question before they move on, and also make the question substantive, like the January 6th, telling the truth, all this other stuff. Like, this is it's just things that don't matter to people. There's a small base of activists that care about the January 6th stuff, and I know that some people do care about it, but that's not what's affecting them on a daily basis. That happened how long ago?
Yeah,
they're affected by the economy. They're affected by the things that are going on in their lives right now, and they're not asking a single thing about that.
Or climate.
Climate.
Right, that's my other favorite one, climate change.
The answers that really pissed me off kind of were when they're asked specifically about the war in Israel and the war in Ukraine. And it's like, Kamala was like, we're all good friends. That's how we're going to deal with it. And Trump was like, it never would have happened. And like, neither one of them addressed, what are you going to do about it? Because it is going on. It is there. It doesn't matter, like friends or what, like, how are we, right. What's the end goal?
How are you going to end this immediately? You know, how are you going to put an end to this immediately? Well, on day one, I'm going to get in there and we're going to end this. We're going to end this because, people are dying. Great.
I mean, I think Trump did make one statement that is most likely true, is that Gaza will be completely wiped off the face of the earth.
Oh, for sure. That will happen. Yeah. Gaza will not exist. And that's been the plan all along.
Yeah, that was where she brought up the two-state solution. She brought up the two-state solution. I was like, I think we're well past that.
Right.
Right. The plan all along.
2 states for that to happen. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the plan all along since the 1940s has for that to have been the case. And then you're seeing that all coming to fruition now. And of course, as the United States has already talked about, partnering with Israel in order to, extract natural gas and all of the resources that are off the coast there. So it's all
the beachfront properties, the real estate agents that are going to be going in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about the money, of course. Yeah. We know that. But also Ukraine, right? It's all about the money, and BlackRock and Vanguard owning those minerals. And how can the United States profit from that? And certainly the Biden administration has in Hunter Biden in that deeply corrupt situation. But how do you stop it? How do you put an end to it? Just by being president? You're going to pick up the phone and tell President Putin to knock it off? I don't think that's going to happen. Putin's been burned so many times by so many U.S. presidents that he's done.
Right.
Like he's like,
I'm going to throw more sanctions. Throw more sanctions on him. Yeah. Like, you know what? That's not exactly working.
Yeah. You know what? You guys just sanction everything. Just do it. It hasn't done anything. But the thing is, and they didn't address something that I think is important too, is BRICS. It's like, because of our dollar, weaponization of the dollar, because of what we've done over there, because of the sanctions we put on all these different places, the BRICS nations are forming, and that's like a big threat to us. And they act like it's not even, like it doesn't matter. They didn't talk about the dollar at all.
At all. The U.S. dollar. So in about, what is today? Today's the 11th, right? Yeah. Today's the 10th. Excuse me. Tomorrow, September 11th, 7 days until the U.S. dollar effectively will change forever, in my opinion, because that's when the Fed will slash interest rates. That's when the Fed will start this era of slashing, as they have talked about. An era of rate cuts is coming. We could see 4 this year, which is an admission by the Fed that the U.S. dollar is in real trouble. And it's going to be in real trouble because it's going to devalue the U.S. currency. And you're going to have there's $6.2 trillion right now in money market accounts. What that's going to do to the U.S. dollar once those rate cuts happen is people are going to dump the U.S. dollar. It's going to be flooding out of money market accounts, and it's going to hit the U.S. economy. And there's going to be more dollars flowing through the United States economy, therefore inflating the inflationary problem that we already have in the United States and further devaluing the currency. And you have these BRICS nations coming together. You had Turkey last week saying that they're ascending to membership in BRICS, which is unbelievable. NATO. They're a NATO country. Yeah. A NATO country is now joining BRICS. That's on top of Iran. That's on top of the United Arab Emirates, with the crown jewel of Dubai sitting in the BRICS, in the
China?
BRICS, China, Russia, India, South Africa. and on and on and on.
Well, they've got like 119 other nations that want to join. They're not going to bring them in just yet, but that's...
You get Venezuela involved and you have OPEC is basically there. Venezuela and I think Nigeria are the only ones not there.
Yeah. It is a disaster for the United States dollar, and it is a disaster for the United States hegemony around the world, which has been supported by military might. You know, the use of a United States aircraft carrier to solidify trade routes and so forth. That was the agreement after the Bretton Woods Accords, right? You use the United States dollar, the petrodollar, and we will provide support and safety for trade. We'll make sure no pirates get to you. And now, of course, we can't even supply that because Houthi rebels can fire, homemade grenades and take out trade and shipping. We can't even provide that safety and security in the seas anymore. So there's a lot of countries right now saying we're done with the U.S. dollar. We want to diversify away from that. We don't want to rely on the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank that's run by the United States. We're sick of it. We want our own. If we want to invest and build a building project, we're going to do it through BRICS financing. We're going to do it through alternative currency sources.
Currencies that have value.
Right.
Because look at how fast from, like the 1970s when the dollar was basically flourishing until just like 10 years ago, we didn't have BRICS as a threat. We still had like the oil was holding up the dollar and things like that. But now look at how much it's depreciated in that time.
Right.
Like how much less it's worth. Now they've got BRICS as a threat. We're losing the petrodollar. Think how fast it's going to depreciate now.
Well, yeah. And of course, with additional rate cuts and admission by the Fed that we are, heading to a bear market for the U.S. dollar. So over the next, we go through these 8-year cycles of the U.S. dollar is now the buying power is going down. So, yeah, that didn't come up tonight. Anyway, I think it's really interesting to look at what has happened here with this debate with these candidates right now. And you see these polls, which I don't believe these polls really to save my life. I think they're terrible. They show the Real Clear Politics poll out today. The Real Clear average poll from realclearpolitics.com right now has Harris up by 1 point. Conglomeration of all the polling right now, Harris is winning by 1 point. Do you guys buy that? Do you believe that? The top battlegrounds right now has Trump up by 3.8 points versus 2020. And there's a lot of toss-up votes still to be had.
I got a question for the chat. For everybody that's watching right now in the chat, have you ever been polled? Like, who's been polled? Because
that's a personal question.
But I'm always like, I think polls. I think polls are one of the easiest things to manipulate and easiest things to use as propaganda because they can pretty much say whatever they want. They don't really ever show who they're polling. How many people? I mean, some of them do, but they don't show who. They don't show tell the questions they're asking. They don't are you just doing Republicans, Democrats, Independent, like whatever. They don't always state like the demographic that they're polling. And so I just feel like look at all the people in the chat. No, never. Like, are these landline phone people?
Well, Susan says Redacted is polled.
Well, when they walked away from basically as people have separated themselves from landlines, polling actually is going to become less accurate because that was actually super accurate. I mean, if you take statistics, it was like if you can actually randomly grab a sample randomly, then your poll is actually pretty accurate, but they can't do that anymore. So all of the polls are kind of swayed based on, like if Fox News does a poll and they do it on their website, the only people they're really polling are people that watch Fox News. If CNN does it, that's what I'm saying. So it's like you're not getting an accurate representation of the population because you don't have a random sample. Without a random sample, your statistics mean nothing. You're not sampling. Right. It's like it's almost pointless.
Right, and when they moved away from landline polling to cell phone polling and so forth, you're right. And so they've had to really shift as much as possible. And polls over the past few years have just plummeted in accuracy. So I don't know who really pays attention to polls anymore.
You know what's a really good poll? Did you see that cookie store in Pennsylvania that was selling the cookies? Over 4,000 Trump cookies sold, 400 Harris cookies.
So what David's talking about is in downtown Philadelphia, not too far, like a stone's throw from where the presidential debate was tonight in Philadelphia, blue Philadelphia. there's a bakery that was selling Donald Trump cookies or Kamala Harris cookies. And she said on the wall, she said right here, over 4,000, like 4,800 cookies were sold.
And a nonpartisan person. She wasn't doing this for political reasons. Like, just a small business trying to make money.
Were the Kamala cookies oatmeal raisin and the Trump ones were chocolate chip? I mean, that's
a good question.
No, they were probably the exact same.
Hey,
like
Kamala
cookie.
oatmeal raisin? I was like, I don't want that oatmeal raisin anywhere near me.
Exactly.
Thing out of my face.
That's a fun poll. Like in liberal blue Philadelphia, downtown Philadelphia.
And the thing is, like, people in those smaller towns, like those smaller areas like that, they support local businesses, right? So you're getting the salt of the earth people going into that bakery buying these things. It's not like you're getting activists coming from the city, the big city, driving down like, we got to go buy these cookies.
Right. Well, everyone here in the chat is saying no, they've never been polled. Never. The only poll they ever take is when we put up a redacted poll here on Redacted on our live show.
Well, and it's just like on X. Like, if you look at, like, so you have a lot of liberal accounts, like even what's the billionaire that owns the
Mark Cuban?
Mark Cuban did a poll, and they're all like, who would you vote for right now, Trump or Kamala? And even their polls to their left audience, people that are like sending you got to go vote in this polls to get Kamala up, Trump is winning by like probably like 60%.
So who won tonight's debate?
I have had poll offers through text message.
Oh, wow.
Actually,
well, I have, but only in local. Only in local Washington.
I just recently had one for my local, for my city, but I have had national polls from Oregon, because I still have an Oregon number. And so, but I usually respond with stop. So I only get one from them.
So reactions, mostly online, of course, about three on one. ABC News debate moderators slammed for their Harris bias.
It was blatant. I mean, to me, like, I think that even your average voter, the people that they're trying to reach, the salt of the earth people, they had to see through that.
Donald Trump just tweeted moments ago, or on Truth Social, he said, "I thought this was my best debate ever, especially since it was 3-on-1." Okay,
that's good.
It's not surprising, of course, when you see that ABC News colluded with the Hillary Clinton campaign on the Russian collusion hoax and the Trump and the Steele dossier. So, of course,
Donna Brazile gave Clinton the questions for the debate she was in.
ABC News, of course, killed the Epstein story. I mean, so are you surprised that ABC News was, coming out swinging on that?
Well, and also, just in my opinion, like, the way that she answered some of those questions so poignantly, answered the question, you know what I mean? But just how tight she was with her responses, it just, to me, there's no way she did not have those questions ahead of time. Of course. There's no way.
Yeah. Like, here's the questions we're going to give you ahead of time. You know what they're going to be. You know what the hot button issues are going to be.
You watch her, like, when she gets caught off the plane with the media, like, on the spot, she can't answer those questions like that. She talks, it's a complete word salad.
Right.
She's talking about her Starbucks cup and lipstick or something.
No, it was a total disgrace for the legacy media. I mean, it really, really was. And again, why is legacy media having these debates anymore? Like, why? Redacted, come on over. Well, let's do a presidential debate right here on Redacted. We'd be thrilled to have it.
Imagine Redacted, Bongino, a couple people like that getting together and saying, we're going to do a stream with 3 moderators, and we're going to ask real questions. It would get more views than anything that these people put out.
Oh, for sure. And I would love to. And X, I would love to have a Twitter debate, an X debate with Elon Musk as the forum and opening it up in that way, and allow X users to ask questions would be unbelievable. But anyway, that's the legacy media for you. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I think, Kamala Harris did what she needed to do, which was look not totally incompetent. Try to stick to her talking points. That's all she needed to do, was just regurgitate her talking points that were handed to her.
And her questions were set up just perfectly for her to do that.
Yeah. And I think Trump was, I wish Trump would have spent more time instead of debating, going after the things that were being thrown at him by Kamala Harris and ABC, if he was going to be able to speak more about specific policies in the United States and what needed to be done at the border. How are you going to round up these individuals and get them out? What are you going to do to fix inflation specifically? How are you going to try to undo all of the crisis right now for the U.S. dollar and inflation? I would have loved to have heard more about that from Trump. So, all in all, an interesting night. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on Redacted Special Edition. Again, thank you so much for subscribing. We're back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time live. We do the show every day live at 4 p.m. Normally, Natalie joins me, my wife.
I was going to say, I won't be here tomorrow.
No, but he'll be in the background. David, my producer, usually runs things from a different studio, so he'll be there, and Philip as well, and Grim, all behind the scenes. So thank you guys so much for being here and joining us on this special debate edition. Let's see if there's another debate. Right now, this is their only one. Will Fox News get a debate? Who knows? We don't know. Anyway, thank you guys so much for subscribing, whether you're watching us on Rumble, on X, on YouTube, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.